Whoa, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. I just pushed the button once, honest. Okay, directional force. That's the arrangement of elements that can move the viewer's eye in, around, or through a work of art. You're thinking about elements that are strong in a piece of work and how they point, which way they move, and which way their direction sort of sends you. This is a good example because it's going in all different directions. The largest piece in this composition is this branch that's moving up and down and through, and then with these tendrils touching the edges of the composition in all different directions. It's a pretty interesting piece, actually. Doug and Mike Starr in Southbury 5. Vertical force. When you see a piece that is arranged primarily on a vertical primarily on a vertical axis or around a vertical axis, that's a good example of vertical force. That tends to express height, power, grandeur. Okay, things that are up and down tend to have this expression of grandeur or sort of larger than life. I had a really hard time finding a good composition with horizontal force because they tend to be peaceful, restful, expressing stability, and not very exciting. So they're harder to find. This piece is kind of an interesting one. It's by Roger Shimamura, The Lineup. And even though there's lots of vertical elements in the piece, the overall organization of those elements is along the horizontal axis. And there's not, there's not a lot of bright color. It's all pretty muted. This guy's kind of bright and green, but other than that, it's all pretty muted, and there's a quietness about it. There's a sense of waiting. And there's also, if you'll notice, hardly anybody engages the viewer, just this little dude right here. Everybody else has got their attention turned away or in some way directed, oftentimes along this horizontal axis as well. Hardly anybody's looking up or down. They're all mostly looking sideways. So that's also creating that sense of quietness or restfulness. Diagonal force often expresses dynamism, agitation, or vigor. This is a way to make a piece more exciting, is to put something diagonal in. Okay, so Audrey Flack's Crayola, there's some vertical stuff going on, but that's also I think these horizontal ones are much more important because they're sort of laid across the rest of them. So they're brought more to our attention. They're a bit more dominant. And they make just this, composition of crayons kind of exciting. And then on the left, the Sebastião Salgado photograph, it's this diagonal light combined with this curving diagonal line that starts moving to the left and then moves up to the right, combined with this line, diagonal coming down, and the diagonal line of the trees. There's actually a lot of diagonal lines going on in this composition, all of which make this a very dynamic piece. Circular force is when elements are expressed along a circular path or radiating from a central point. This often expresses fullness, harmony, joy, and inner stability. Here's a couple of different examples. Fred Tomaselli, Halo of Flies. And there's definitely a sort of a sense of fullness or stability, and I don't know, the title is creepy, but I think the piece is pretty beautiful. And then on the right, this Isaac Abrams piece, even though it's not a perfect circle, you still get this sense of things radiating or circling around a central point. And you still get, and then there's a lot of circular objects as well, reinforcing that sort of circular force. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a circle to have circular force. These objects kind of radiating and swirling around still do it. Okay, triangular force is an arrangement of elements that rely on a triangular structure, which provides actual or illusory stability. A triangle is a very, very stable compositional shape. When I'm talking about this, what we're doing is we're looking at the main shapes that create the composition. So right here, this guy is really strongly emphasized, and this diagonal line from his shoulder down and then continuing along in this line of skulls out of his hand, then comes up here, and you get another angle over here, and that creates sort of this strong triangle. There's a smaller one at his legs. Okay, there's even kind of a reversed one with this diagonal line coming up here. And whoops, come back. So there's a lot of triangles going on. There's the red stuff back here. Even the ground is a low, flat triangle. And all of that creates a very stable composition, but that also has got a lot of force to it because the diagonals in the triangles add dynamism, while the triangle itself stabilizes the object in the piece. When we talk about movement, there's kind of two ways it can be talked about when we're talking about two-dimensional work. Either a piece that actually gives you the illusion of something moving, such as the Natalia Goncharova piece on the left called Cyclist, where a lot of the devices that create a sense of movement, like multiple representations of a single object, like this foot. Here's a foot, but then there's also one here, 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 and here. There's extra, bars here. Here's his back 4 or 5 times. Things being divided up, motion lines. A lot of that stuff gives the sense of something really moving, or the intent, at least, that you should perceive this thing as to be moving. Or we could talk about movement in terms of eye movement, the way your eye moves around the piece. The Caravaggio piece on the right over here, you'll notice if you kind of take a look at the way the lines move, these vertical lines here, this horizontal line here, this sort of curved line around there. And I'm talking about the line which forms the edge of something light against something dark, okay? Or a dark line amid something light, where your eye is really pulled. Everything kind of circles you down to this one spot right here. Everything on this side kind of brings you up, and then you go up, and then down in. Over here, if you start up here at this guy's face, there's a face, there's a light face, there's a light face, and then, you're back over here again. What if you start over here, you come up along here, and whoa, pretty soon you're back over here. Everything keeps circling you around to the focal point of the piece right here, which is this guy, Doubting Thomas, putting his hand in Jesus' sword. If you know the story, this is one guy, this is after Jesus supposedly is raised from the dead. Some people are like, it's not supposedly, whatever. This is art, we're not discussing religion. But the composition is about this guy who doesn't believe that he was dead. And he says, all right, you don't believe me? Here, come put your hand in my sore. So here he is. And everything is focused about this. The gazes of all the characters are also focused there. So even if you look at their faces, what are they looking at? And you go back to that. One way to create direction and force is to have your character look at something. Then anybody who looks at your piece will look and see what... You guys remember that when you were in high school or college and you'd go downtown and you'd have 3 or 4 friends, you'd start looking up at a building and, hey, look, check it out. And you just look up and pretty soon everybody around you's looking up to see what you're looking at. It works in art too.
That's what I did with my girl painting in for the thing.
Yep, that's right. We're very suggestible. If somebody points at something, we want to look and see what they're looking at. Okay, unity and variety together create, in balance, will create a sense of harmony with a piece. There's enough unity for things to feel like they belong together, enough variety for it to be interesting. There are some different elements that are part of a Gestalt understanding of how we as humans take things in that have to do with visual linking, continuity, and elements that touch or connect or have shared edges that we're going to talk about next. When objects share edges, they feel more like they belong together than if they don't share an edge, or if they're not touching, or if they're not at least close to each other. These are different ways that objects can share edges. By something that appears to be overlapping something else. This light blue object seems to be in front of this one because this edge of this shape is shared by the edge of that shape. You guys are dealing a lot with that right now in your compositions, your collages. Transparency is when it appears that you can see through one object to what's behind it. This is in fact 3 different colored shapes, but it looks like you're seeing through this one to that one in the back. This is not my slide, and this is not a very good example of interpenetration. Interpenetration is like if you had a needle and you're stitching through a piece of cloth, and you see the needle going down into the cloth, and then it comes back out. It's actually going through or penetrating that material. Or like weaving or something woven together, okay? And then extensions and linking are when your eye is pulled past the edge of the composition to see something continue or touch. So in this photograph right here, these lines of clouds, you imagine them continuing. You imagine them extending past the edge of the composition in both directions. So that's an example of extensions. Something that is implied that it continues beyond the edge of the composition. That also creates a sense of harmony. Hold on, there's also things called containment, proximity, and grouping, and I just need to talk about those because I don't have a good slide. It got destroyed and I haven't. made a new one yet. Containment is when something's inside something else. If you put a box around something, you're containing it, it feels more like it belongs together than if not. So if you've got 3 or 4 things and you put a box around them, then they feel like they're a set. Again, from math. Proximity, things being close to each other feel more like they belong together than things that are really spread out. And grouping, that's a hard one to talk about.